Us to break down this topic, Casey Newton, the Verge's Silicon Valley editor, and Roger McNamee, Elevate Partners co-founder and author of the book Zucked, Waking Up to the Facebook Catastrophe. Good to see you both. Just, Casey, if you could set this up for us a little deeper. Clearly, the EU is looking into some of these issues, its antitrust division over the App Store. How big of a deal, how big of an issue is this for Apple?
It's starting to become very real. It was a year ago that Spotify made a formal complaint to the EU and asked for an investigation. And it was just this week that we learned that, in fact, one would be underway, not just for App Store policies, but also for Apple Pay and the way that Apple privileges its own NFC payment solution over other developers. And then along comes Basecamp with a new email app and makes a ton of hay out of some policies that are frankly very hard to understand and appear to have been somewhat inconsistently enforced. So ahead of WWDC next week, when Apple is heading out there to make its case that it's a great platform developers, I'd say they have a lot to worry about right now.
Roger, whether it was down to regulation or competition or anything else, were people's long-term expectations that Apple would always hold on to such a big chunk of the economics within the App Store, or did people think that over time it would decrease anyway?
When Apple first introduced the App Store, remember the alternative was dealing directly with the platforms of that era, which were the cellular companies, which typically charge 50% or more to an app developer. So when Apple came along, it was greeted as the hero. Now that Apple is so gigantic, Casey's point kicks in, which is that it does look excessive because Apple has a 30% fee on everything that goes through the store. The reality is that does work for the vast majority of developers. And obviously, Apple's global market share is like 10%. So there are alternatives, but they've handled the politics horrifically badly. And I do think there are opportunities for Apple to do better, and some categories in which the deal that they're offering today is getting harder to defend simply because of the scale of the company. That said, at the end of the day, what Apple offers for that 30% is protection for the users in the form of better security, better privacy, and maintaining an ironclad grip on what can go into the App Store is essential. And if I were Apple, I would concede some of the economics in order to maintain the control. This is not the same kind of antitrust case that should be going on now against Google, against Facebook, and against Amazon, which are using their power to undermine potential competitors. Apple's simply just charging a lot of money to people who would rather pay less.
Casey, does that argument work from Roger? Not to mention the fact that Apple can point to the hundreds of companies and apps that it has helped smaller companies, smaller businesses, by putting it on its App Store, making them safe, making them seamless when it comes to payment information and everything else.
Well, look, they could certainly enforce rigid moderation of what's allowed in the App Store without still taking a 30% cut of everything that gets sold. Apple loves to talk about the great consumer experience. The consumer always comes first. And yet, if you go to buy a book on the Kindle app, you're going to find you can't do it. And if you go to subscribe to Netflix on your iPhone, you'll find you can't do it. And it's because Apple has just set up roadblock after roadblock so that whether you're a big company or a small company, you can't go through their toll booth without taking a huge cut. So I just think that they need to take a second look at this, because you've got some really smart people who are trying to make heads or tails of their policies, and they can't. And if you can't explain yourself, I think that's when you're going to find yourself on the wrong side of regulators.
Roger, have they got a bigger risk to face outside of the US, not just because the regulators might be taking a keener look at them, but also because the market share of iOS versus Android is not quite so strong?
I think, Will, they have a problem politically everywhere today. I think one of the things that's happened the last 3 months is that the combination of the extraordinary damage of the coronavirus pandemic, the economy coming down underneath that, and the clear relationship that technology has, not so much Apple, but especially Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, to the political challenges that we're facing as a country has put technology right in the regulatory crosshairs in this country. In Europe, it was far more advanced. And I think in Europe, they have all these issues of fairness that in the United States, historically, we've not had. In the United States, consumers have gotten short shrift for a very long time. And so the notion that people would complain because Apple's prices are too high is something that I think regulators would have disregarded as recently as 3 months ago. But I do think today the situation has changed. I think everything is up for negotiation now, and consumers have much more power. And candidly, I believe every tech company would be well advised to accept that the world is not going back to the thing that made them so successful. I think for Apple, this is not a life-threatening issue. Apple should be able to find a nice place to land in Europe, a nice place to land in the US. They're going to have to give up some economics. I'm totally with Casey on this issue, that the politics do not favor them today. But in comparison to Google and to Facebook and to Amazon, the issues are trivial. And as investors, we should keep our eye on the ball because the regulatory threat affects everybody.
Right. And this isn't their first fight with the EU antitrust chief, Margaret Vestager, in terms of Apple. Casey, just wanted to bring up Twitter because big news today again. The company slapped a manipulated media warning on President Trump's racist baby tweet. What are going to be the ramifications of that? Was their third action they've done recently when it comes to labeling the president's tweet or correcting the president's tweet?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of funny. It seems like it was only a few weeks ago when the question was, will Twitter ever take action against the president? And a lot of folks thought, well, maybe not. They'll do anything they can to avoid taking action. And then Trump just kind of bulldozed right over the line. Somewhat cynically, I sort of see this as a win for everyone. Trump gets to go on complaining about, bias against conservatives on social media. He's being censored. But for companies like Twitter and also Facebook, who's taken similar actions, they get to go back to their employees and say, hey, look, we actually did enforce our policies. No one is above the law here. And that's going to be good for morale. So as sort of depressing as it is to watch unfold, I think everybody gets something out of this.
Casey and Roger, thank you both for joining us.